We actually connected. We seeing things. Okay, let me try to do. Yeah, see, I don't even know where I was exactly going to start. Draconian Discourse, episode 7. It is the 7th episode in this season. Not including, like obviously not in total with everything. So yeah, this is, I was talking about a vague reference to the betas, the alphas and betas. I had like 3 alphas and 2 beta episodes or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I'm I must just be like really out of my element. Didn't warm up any of the things in the brain to start talking about things today. So, on the docket for today is, well, it's July. It's the day after my birthday, in fact. So, it's not like it's we've had a little bit of a while since it's been a Pride Month and everything. So I may as well get some get some of this in today. I suppose just in general, I am the anti-LGBT pride. I am bisexual. I do not think that I should be seeping my entire self-image into my personal sexual attractions. It's like, well, do I choose those? Do I not choose those? Like, I genuinely believe that it does not define me, and so I'm not going to choose to define myself by it. And actually, life is a lot easier that way, because then you're in control of your own emotions. If you don't think that other people have to kind of be your own, what's the word? I'm responsible for my happiness, and if other people don't like me, that's their issue, right? Like, you know, if that's all that it was, the movement of being like, hey, people don't like us, but that's okay, then it's like, well, yeah, it's not like you have to have a parade then, right? That's a lot of sort of the ideas behind this, where it's like, well, everybody believes, well, people don't like us, and they don't like us because of our behavior, and we are defined by our behavior and not by our intrinsic worth as individuals or something like that. Which I guess this is, oh crap. Hate it when that happens. I suppose this is kind of a close to that, but I don't know. I guess that's enough of an intro for that. I really am trying to kind of minimize how long it takes for me to just be thinking of things. I think enough. I think enough about things. Just because I like to put caveats all over every single thing that I say in order to ensure that I'm not saying things that I don't mean. Doesn't mean that I can't also be as quick as possible when it comes to getting things through. So it's like, well, you know, I think I've said my piece on that topic. Let's move on to the next one. I like to be thorough, but I think I'm also paranoid about being thorough to the point where it's like, beating a dead horse, man. It's already dead. You can just move on with it here. So I suppose first on the docket is, and this should be showing the show. There we are. First on the docket was this this little thing here, this thread, as they call it on Twitter. Oh, and I'm not showing up on this. There I am. Look at me. Amazing and beautiful. So over here, you know, before Pride Month is over, just like, oh yeah, I've only got one month, to let everybody know how trans I am, to let everybody know how bi, gay, or pansexual, or lesbian, or all of the letters, all of the alphabets. I've only got one chance, this 1 month, to let everybody know about all of my sexual proclivities, because those proclivities define me and my identity. I've only got 1 month to do it. I'm gonna bitch about it the rest of the year, but I've only got 1 month to do it. So it's like, this is our time. It's like, okay, Is it your time? Like how much of your time is it, and how much of it is actually you just trying to monopolize everybody else's time? It's just it's like I don't think you're actually doing that. I just don't really believe you at one point. At a certain point, you've kind of lost a little bit of goodwill. I think this meme kind of does it. I find it kind of funny to have like Red be here, because it's like, this is not really lib left, because obviously it is talking about a social pressure, but this is inherently an authoritarian thing to do. So it's like, I don't think I'm really going to put Red in here necessarily. There's certainly people within that quadrant who I will engage in conversation with, and who, to whatever friendly degree, I'll obviously be putting up with and whatnot, but most of them are not tolerant of this side of the aisle here. So it's kind of funny. That's just like, I don't know if you really, I think you are more in with this crowd, but that is kind of what it is. We've only got our one chance. This is our time. And then it's just like, okay, if Pride was your time, why isn't what about the rest of the year? Whose time is that? Well, it's also their time. Oh, okay. All the time is their time. They want to monopolize everything. They want to monopolize spaces. They want to monopolize conversations. They want to monopolize everything to make it all reflect their own personal beliefs. And it's like, sounds a little bit closer to the definition of a theocracy than I think a lot of other Americans are willing to go along with. A lot of people just in general, freedom-loving, liberal, liberty-loving people are willing to go along with, where it's just like, I don't really believe exactly what you believe, so I don't think I need to have that forced upon me. Can you do that? And then, no, they don't want to do that for you. So anyway, rambles aside there, it's interesting, you know. I wanted to share a comic with you all. Archaeologists will know you were trans, and I certainly think that is actually true. That there will be an ability, and I mean, I've spoken on this before, and that is the first thing that I say in my response here is like, yep, there's Bones episode on this, because they had the Sans Undertale meme. I mean, it's I think it's an old enough tweet. Don't really necessarily have to dig for it. Probably should have done that on a bit of a show prep. But what's to say that we are an actual professional organization over here? It's Raincloud Dragon's brain. I think I might be in a bit of a strange mood today. It's nice though. So yeah, I've said previously, it's like archaeologists are pretty good at deciphering what things were like, and going back in history and realizing, okay, this is how things are. But I think that there's a jump in logic here that is like, just because archaeologists will know you were trans doesn't necessarily mean that they will also agree with your insane, frankly, view on what that means. Like that they will understand how you lived your life, and generally how a lot of people viewed this, but especially due to the way that history is that they're going to look back in time, and you know, there's going to be accounts, many historical accounts. Nowadays, like it actually is quite impressive, and I do want to move on relatively soon, but it really is quite impressive how much historical knowledge is gained from archaeology, and how little really that is gained. When you go back to whatever times that we look back to, a lot of this information is simply inferred from what we, as much as we can possibly understand about it. But there is no single account of what history is. You know, there are histories, and a lot of those histories depend on what the intent of the historian going into it is. And you know, you if you're looking for one particular narrative, and not necessarily like a particular ideological narrative, it's just a focus where it's like, well, this is what I want to see. I want to see how the economic situations during this period were like, and I want to see how there was this vast change from one economic situation to another. And a lot of the time, if that's sort of your angle, like you have to kind of take it holistically, where you're not really throwing out the baby with the bathwater when there's something that doesn't exactly fit your narrative. And I mean, this is something you see in science, and history is a science. It's not the most exact science, because there's a lot of inference that must be made, and because we don't have the possibility to know everything there is to know about everything, right? But it's difficult when all of these historical accounts have been lost to time. There's so many things, you know, they had only found one singular Roman plume like ever. Like most of these were like drawn and whatnot. Oh, nice, that's cool. But it's like these were not actually known to exist. Like people didn't. The only way that we knew that these existed in a historical context is mostly from the documents and paintings and whatnot. Is that we would see that these were clearly existed, but they had all decayed. There were none that were preserved until they went into a particular archaeological site where they had actually been able to discover one that was intact and very well preserved. And so that's only one example, but writings and historical records, all of human history really doesn't span that far beyond like 50,000 years, because the further back you go, the less people had the ability to actually document history. And so now we're at the point where we can document history so immense, like so in such detail and so immensely, that we can actually get quite an accurate view. But ironically enough, people see such a vast amount of knowledge, all of however long human beings have been around, years and years of reverse engineering of the creation that we are in, whether you believe that's God's creations or it just exists, which I think the evidence personally is scant. I think there is scant evidence for that. That's my view. But when that's sort of the situation we're dealing with, like, it's ironic that we have everything, all of this knowledge, and yet it's so much more difficult to see the truth. It seems, and I think so much of that is just a confirmation bias and the cognitive dissonance. Is that we run from cognitive dissonance because we don't like this thing doesn't actually fit into the box that I want to paint the world into. So we run away from that, and then we run directly towards we run from cognitive dissonance, and then we run into confirmation bias. Confirmation bias exists as a product of cognitive dissonance. I don't like that I can't understand this thing. So rather than trying to delve into and understand, how can this perhaps fit into the idea that I have, and maybe the painting that I've got of what the world is has to actually become a lot more nuanced, rather than understanding like we can actually embrace a nuanced view here. We are very apt to want to seek the confirmation bias instead. Say, no, I'm going to reject information that actually does not align with it. But I truly do think that archaeologists will look back with a proper holistic view. As MLK said, the arc of history is long, but it tends towards justice. I think people will look back on the current historical era that we are in, and they will see it as for what it is. That there is that human beings are complicated, that these creatures, these machines walking the earth, these children of God, whatever you want to call them, complicated little things, and nobody's perfect, and there's going to be people who make some real mistakes in overcorrecting the behavior of other people, whether that be somebody saying, I don't really like those trans people because something about them offends me or something. Goodness sake, am I lagging? Who's lagging here? Is it you? You ugly. Oh, bloody, yeah, that's right. Interrupting me like this. Do not do not leave Pogo. Goodness sake, the lag, man. Do not leave Pogo running in the background of the phone. It will not be able to recover. Rubbish. Come on. You genuinely suck. I'm gonna turn down the brightness all the way, do the thing there, and hopefully it'll cool down at least a little bit to be able to stop me lagging out. You are full of crap. So ridiculous. Oh my goodness. Anyway, yeah, I think it'll figure itself out. I think it has. I think it's finally decided to stop being stupid. Yeah, I should have exited out of that, and then otherwise wouldn't have happened. Yeah, I think genuinely, and this is all in the view of with the intent of having a good discourse. Is that my belief is that we are going to look back at our generation and our generation, collective terms, of course, that bother me, but human beings in future is going to look at the current geopolitical time that we are in now, and they are going to geopolitical societal time, and almost nothing is going to matter during the time where it's like, oh, there's all of these complicated things going on. I'm certain things are going to be very contested, and there's going to be simplistic views of it. But I think the simplistic view that is going to happen is that everybody's going to be looking back and wondering, how is it possible that we were murdering so many babies and that there were people stumping for baby killing? How is it that we as human beings had allowed everybody to groom children in this way, and that they were stumping for it? How is it that there are people who were saying that we are going to deny that there is any biological reality whatsoever in a difference between the sexes in a sexually dimorphic species, and that it doesn't matter, whatever you feel matters? And how is it that we reject all of these ideas about objective reality and supplant it with this idea of the hedonistic, you just live the way that you want to live regardless of anybody else? That idea is inherently antithetical to the American system, inherently antithetical to everything that is truly undergirding any liberal society, any society that appreciates liberty and says these liberties exist and the purpose of government is to protect these liberties. We're going to be really concerned about that. Is where we've got this, I think the narrative may be, in general, hedonism is what defined this period. Societally, culturally, hedonism defined this period. Everybody was saying all of this is hedonism. Only you matter. You matter. Your truth. Speak your truth. Live your truth. Believe women. Or believe yourself. Or believe all of what, except when it comes to the status quo, or what we perceive to be the status quo. It doesn't actually matter that status quo actually is, in large part, this sort of cultural leftism, not necessarily Marxism or like a wokeism or whatever people are wanting to label it, but kind of tends to be seen as a status quo, at least in the sense that all of the elite are going along with it. It's just like, me as the elite, I can tell you that you should adopt my belief system, even though I don't necessarily enact all of the core tenets of that belief system, because it's wrong, and not that it's wrong, but consequentially It's like, oh yeah, you can sleep with whoever you want and you can abort 1 million babies and it's totally fine and it's absolutely, but then it's like, oh, but I do have a wife and kids and I do actually have a nuclear family, but I'm not going to actually encourage people to do that. It's like, well, then why? It's like you're going to go out here and beride, I think is the term, berate the idea of the nuclear family, deride the idea and the concept of the nuclear family, but you are also going to not live that way yourself. When it comes to, it's like, oh, I really hate that people tell other people that they should have the nuclear family. But I'm also going to have it because, objectively speaking, it is the best way for me to have happiness and for my children to have success later in life. Bit odd that, regardless, I truly do think that abortion is going to be one of the major issues that people look back on in history, and really rein in on that. Like, how is it possible? It truly is a more modern parallel, rhyming, as not C.S. Lewis. Mark Twain said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. It truly is a rhyming of slavery, where it's like, well, what a slaver was doing, what the argument for slavery was that, well, I can define what a human life is, and this is not it, and therefore, because this isn't a human life, I can use this as chattel. I can abuse the rights of this because, well, it says it's not a right because it's not human. There is no inalienable right to this creature here, because while it is a creature, and I understand that it's a creature, it doesn't actually have any rights, and I can just use and abuse and profit off of whatever it is that I want to do, because it's like, well, it's just an object. It doesn't have any sort of sentience. It doesn't have liberty, and so I have no reason to actually respect that liberty. But that's the exact same argument, that fundamentally the exact same idea, the same strategy, the same underpinning belief that, well, these creatures, that they're not actually people, that they're not actually unique biological code that defines significant things about your physiognomy and your actual psychology, who you are physically and who you are mentally, when it comes to your identity. So much of that is contained within this biological code that is created directly at conception. That all of these predispositions and a significant amount of your personality is actually based off of nature. Now, a lot of it is nurture as well, but so much of it is in nature. And it's like, we're going to define you out of existence at the point where there's no delineation. What am I just saying? Words like, we're going to define you out of existence at arbitrary points. Where it's like, well, you got to have a pulse, and it's just like, okay, so the people who get defibrillated, right? Obviously this is an argument that has been made a billion times, and I don't necessarily have to discuss it here because it's not exactly relevant to the topic. But I think that is going to be the primary issue, is that debate, and then the secondary issue is going to probably be something about either race relations or about trans issues, I suppose, is the topic that people want to talk about. It's gonna be, as you look at it, this perception that everybody's got, where it might not be institutional in the sense that people have got like big old church of the woke or whatever that says like, hey, you've got to do this, and this is the sacrament, and these are all the things. But we're in the time, due to a cultural reactionary behavior, that there's a swinging of the pendulum so far in one direction that it's just destined to actually swing back in the other direction. Eventually that direction is going to go where people like, hold on, you're having a really hard time stringing me along down this insane ideology here. Like, I understand that you have this perspective, and your perspective is motivated by all of these different things, but it's irrational in the sense that you are not actually considering objective truth here. You have no consideration for objective truth. You're only looking at the things that make you feel better, and that sort of that sort of respect of the id of everybody sort of on the cultural left, where only feelings matter, and feelings matter this much, and rights don't matter, and practicality doesn't matter, and decency truly doesn't really matter as well. Only the only type of decency, the only type of practicality, the only type of respect is when it is somebody who I feel bad for, and I feel bad for them because they've got their feelings, and I'm told that those feelings can never be wrong. And it's like, oh, feelings can of course be wrong, especially when it comes to, at least in the very least, consequentialism. And so this is the narrative that I think is going to fail. Every single narrative that is based only on your personal feelings and on no objective facts that motivate your beliefs, a belief that is motivated only by your feelings is a belief that is destined to fall. It might not be in your lifetime. You may stubbornly cling to it your entire life, but it's going to fall whether you like it or not if you don't actually base that foundation off of something that is factual. In Christianity, it might also. No, I think it is a Christian thing. It might not actually be Old Testament in the Jewish tradition, but they talk about building your house upon a rock versus building it upon the sands. And if it's on the sands, it washes away, and if it's on the rock, it actually stands firm and it will not be moved. Somebody who bases their belief on, but I just feel this way. This is just the way I feel. Why does that not matter to you the way I feel? Well, you've actually got to be able to explain what motivates you, and not in a way that demeans me for not following along when you've actually not been giving me anything to string me along and understand this. So obviously this is a precursor to a more tight specific debate, but every single disagreement eventually comes down to religion, and everybody's got one. That religion is a belief system. Everybody's got one of those, and it may not be specifically Catholic or Protestant or Satanist or pescatarian, but everybody's got a collection of beliefs that they hold to be true, and you've got to be able to actually communicate those beliefs. And if you don't know why you believe what you believe will never be able to go on in the world. So it's obviously important to understand how that applies to this, because every single time we're going to be talking about simply the statement, archaeologists will know you were trans, which is a statement of fact, frankly. But it's a loaded situation, because simply the existence of people being trans automatically brings into a question of moral permissibility. Now, I think it is absolutely perfectly morally permissible for you to use your liberty to make decisions that you make rational risk assumption assessments, and to make decisions about what you want to do in your life, to pursue happiness in the way that you see fit. That is your prerogative. But in and of itself, the undergirding ideology behind the existence of trans people is that it does not matter that there is a biological reality. It does not matter that there is a difference between the sexes in a sexually dimorphic species, such as the species Homo sapiens, of which everybody on the earth, except for me, of course, because I am a dragon, and but everybody on the earth is a member of that species. You can actually just deny reality, and you can defy gravity, and you can deny that any sort of objective truth exists because you feel like objective truth challenges you. It's like, well, okay, but if you want to be happy, if you want to have a healthy relationship with if you want to be happy, you need to have a healthy relationship with reality. Nobody has ever been has ever experienced a true lasting sense of happiness if they hate the fact that things are the way that they are. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be frustrated with it. I'm absolutely certain that anybody with trans dysphoria, whatever you want to call it, anybody who feels the need to become trans, that motivation does not necessarily come out of sort of, feelings exist for a reason. Feelings are inherently consequentialist, and I truly believe that rationality in a sense is just us trying to draw boxes into people where you have this irrationality, and this irrationality therefore means that you are mentally ill. And it's like, I think as time goes on, we're actually going to understand more and more, and understanding that and this is what they call abnormal psychology, is that just because you have a perspective that is drastically differs from the rest of society does not mean that you are broken. It means that something in your past gave you reason to believe that this is the way that things are, and therefore you interface with reality in a very different way that other people do. And some of that is biological. Obviously, you don't some of it is nature, some of it is nurture, some of it is your choice, and some of it is not your choice. But it becomes your choice the moment that you decide to actually think about it. Anyway, moving on, because there's only going to be more of this. But it's like, people assume bones can tell your gender, and clearly this one's got a tie and this one's got a bow, and it's just like, oh, it's kind of funny because I don't actually think of, if we're talking about this from a scientific sense, and this is a scientific topic because we're talking about archaeologists, and so this is what we are talking about, biology right here. When you paint it in terms of, well, girls wear bows and guys wear ties, it's like, well, you're being really simplistic about this. Just because that is the way that things ended up does not mean that is inherently the question of, morally speaking, is it true versus what does it mean? What does it mean? Is it true that men cannot wear bows and that women cannot wear ties? Absolutely not, because anybody with eyes can see that women are that people are perfectly capable of wearing any article of clothing in particular. But what does it mean to wear a tie, and what does it mean to wear a bow? You actually have to look into an anthropological, and that's just, not even tangential to this topic. You have to look from an anthropological perspective. Why is it that men wear ties, and why is it that women wear bows, or boys wear this type of clothing? Boys wear blue and women wear pink, and where does that come from? Well, you actually have to look in it from an anthropological sense. And in an anthropological sense, obviously, biology did not cause this, or this to occur, but the reason that these tend to be tied to specific genders is because of the way that things turn, is because of the biological reality that there is a difference between the sexes, and eventually those differences ended up enshrining themselves into traditions that we don't necessarily always question. That's why they're still around. But it's funny because I don't think that, I think a guy can wear a bow. I think a girl can wear a tie. I think that may have certain implications depending on the society that you're in. I think if a guy wears a bow, then he shouldn't expect people to treat him exactly the same as a man who wears a tie, because culturally, anthropologically speaking, those things mean different things in the context of a society that is relatively heterogeneous. Or homogeneous, I should say, of the opposite. These are not necessarily the result of biology, but it is the result of us thinking about the differences between the sexes and coming to a certain conclusion, and then eventually passing down that, reverse engineering that conclusion to the children of our children of our children, and eventually this is the way that we sort of see the objective reality here. But it's like nobody obviously sees it in this simplistic light, except for, it seems, the people who are arguing for from the side of sort of this this gender ideology, this whatever the word is, progressive. It's just the idea that because I don't think that sex equals the way that you your sex does not define the clothes that you wear, because you can wear any sort of article of clothing, but that your sex does actually define a certain amount of what actually will work when it comes to exiting the state of nature, in a Lockean sense. It's like, it doesn't matter which articles of clothing that you wear, but if you present yourself in one way, versus presenting yourself in another way, then things are going to be different. If I, as a man, go into the and particularly as a bisexual man, if I go into the office and I show up not in a suit and tie but in some lingerie, then people are going to think of me in a certain way, and there's going to be certain consequences as a result of that. Consequences meaning results. I did something and now something is going to come of it. The cause to effect, not necessarily like you did something bad, because that's the connotation of that word. It's you did something and therefore there is an effect, whether you like it or not. Every action has an equal opposite reaction, as a statement of scientific fact, not necessarily as a you deserve to be punished for everything you do. It's like, well, no, things happen due to the way that you behave, that it just is the way that it is. So that's sort of what I'm saying in that sense, is that people are going to look at you differently based off of what you wear. If you dye your hair, that is going to mean something different to an in-group of everybody in this group dyes their hair, then it's going to mean to an out-group of everybody who doesn't actually do that. And so obviously there is a societal, a cultural change over time, but you can truly see the true fascistic tendencies of the left in attempting to control the cultural hegemony when it comes to this particular topic. But regardless, the point here is that bones can tell your sex. That is what people are arguing when they say, well, you've got this angle in this area, the pelvis, this is very, very different between the male and the female because they are designed for different purposes. A male cannot give birth because there's no uterus in there, and even if there was a uterus in there, it would have a hard time fitting in with everything else that is, just the bone shape is going to affect significant amounts of everything there, and you can't just snap your fingers and change all of that. If you did, then obviously there would be a need for society to change things in order to to account for the fact that now we can suddenly say, okay, all of my Y chromosomes are now X chromosomes, and I am perfectly 100% female now. And in a while, I'd imagine that would be immensely painful, and potentially you would end up with, just on the cellular level, having like an entire chromosome swapped out with another is, it's the concept is basically impossible. But on even just the cellular level of saying we're going to swap out this chromosome, and now you're going to make these proteins and amino acids and read these blueprints, build these blueprints, these instructions instead on a cellular level, you're going to see a lot of consequences due to that may just mean that cell ends up dying. For all we know, that this would end up in sort of an X-Men scenario where people just end up with cancer. I'm talking sort of specifically Deadpool, where it's just like I don't think that it's even necessarily possible on the cellular level. It's like, oh, my body is like dissolving and suddenly my penis is inverting into a vagina. Like I don't think that is highly likely to be something that we could do stable in a stable sense. But regardless, behavior, I don't believe that behavior is defined by sex. I believe that it is far more likely for people to behave a certain way, but everybody's an individual. So your behavior is not actually defined by your sex, and you should not have your identity tied up in what you are. You should have your identity tied up in who you are, and moreover, who you choose to be. It's far more important for you to put your worth in who you choose to be rather than who you are or who you were or who other people expect you to be. And so if other people have an expectation that you behave a certain way, somebody who has a healthy relationship with reality, somebody who just wants to behave the way that they want to behave, is not really going to have a problem with somebody saying, well, you've got a Y chromosome and that means that you are a male. And they're going to be like, well, yeah, my sex is male, but I really don't like physiologically being male. This is something that I can kind of relate to in certain ways, is that there's some things about male that I don't really like being, but I always truly think that the grass is greener on the other side, and it's a fool's errand in an individual level and in a interpersonal level to try to make it so that every single thing about objective reality conforms to what you wish it to be. The moment that you realize that there are some things that are out of your control, is the moment that you actually start focusing on what truly matters, and that is what is in your control. You can't control the way that other people think, feel about you, but you can absolutely control what you decide to actually put an emphasis on. And how unhealthy are you going to be if you just think about yourself as, oh, I'm so oppressed and all of these people think differently than me and they think that I'm doing something wrong by living the way by living my truth. All of these people think that I'm just a bad person for doing all of these things. It's like, well, maybe you should actually own that you aren't perfect and that you have things about yourself that you wish you could change in the very least. And you can get that from different religions. There's all sorts of different religions that are all about helping yourself out in terms of improving yourself. But the first thing you have to actually do, every 12-step program says, I've got a problem. Every single person should be on the first step of that problem saying, I got a problem, I'm not perfect, but I expect myself to be, and I wish I were. And you can't be perfect, you'll never be perfect, but you can get closer to it. And when you actually look at it from that perspective, you're not going to be so offended that people say, because you got a Y chromosome, your pelvis is going to be very different from the pelvis of a female. It's ironic that people say, well, bones, they assume that bones can tell your gender. It's just like, okay, this terminology is stupid, all right? Because gender was colloquially in a societal fashion, in a cultural fashion, it was used to say, it was used to refer to biological sex without saying the word sex, because sex noun means your gonads, your chromosomal makeup, your secondary sex characteristics, all of that. And it was used to specifically refer to that as in a noun sense, and then in a verb sense, it was used to say, well, the physical act of copulation of but I think, I don't know, copulation is kind of an antiquated term, but sex verb and sex noun were two different things. They were the same word, and so the word sex, there was a cultural idea of like, we don't really want to use the exact same word for that because we're sort of afraid, and I think it again, it's another fool's errand to try and baby-proof the world. People are going to know, your kids are going to know about sex, and they got to learn eventually. So you can mention the phrase without actually mentioning the act or making light of it in a way that, it's a serious topic when it comes to your personal life decisions, but it's not necessarily like you mentioning that sex exists is not going to necessarily harm people, and you discussing with and you trying to shield children from the fact that sex exists is not going to, like, spoiler alert, sooner or later they're going to find out anyway, right? So you're not really helping anything here. Actually, it will be easier for you to be able to sit down with your kid and say, we're a sexually dimorphic species, and what that means is that we got the males and we got the females, and they are different. And males males do one thing, females do the other thing in a reproductive sense. And I don't know, the right age to do that is probably around when they start to mature, is explaining, well, these are the changes that are happening in your body, and this is why those changes are occurring. But it's inherently people saying, you know, the term gender was originally adopted by society to mean to mean male or female, to mean a synonym for sex, the same word for sex, but in a sense that we don't actually have to say the word sex, because that word is like that you might confuse that with something else, right? But it's like I think it was a mistake to do that, especially considering the origins of the word, because the origins of the word obviously was invented by a pedophile, and a significant amount of the sort of intersectional gender ideology was invented by pedophiles. So take that as you will. Simone de Beauvoir was sus, to say the very least, and people just want to mince words with these terms. It's like, okay, define your terms, because if you mean gender meaning biological sex, absolutely Bones can tell your biological sex. Depending on which methods you are using, you can get, you know, a significant portion of sexual what do you call it, you can actually relatively easily with one bone, if you go in and you can, with one cell, if you can extract the DNA from it, you can be like, okay, so this is somebody who has, you know, XY, that is clearly a male, or this is somebody with XX, it's clearly a female. Or if it goes more complicated, that when you get into some genetic abnormalities, you get into, okay, that there are 3 X chromosomes here, so clearly this person had this, you know, in the same way that you can that we can begin to understand everything about the genome, the human genome, or any other genome. You can tell a significant portion from that. You know, physiognomy, and this is something that some people on the anti-trans side, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily right wing, but you know, people sort of on the anti-trans side will generally tend to go like, what is it, like the trans conspiracy theorists, or the trans spotters. I think there's a name for them, but you know, they try to like decode. Oh, look at the frame, and look at the face. Look at the facial physiognomy, and look at it's like, okay, there's variation, okay? Like, sometimes you can't just simply tell, because you can see one person who is on a you know, and the reason, you know, you can tell in people who, to use their term, people who are cis, some of them just kind of don't look like the sex that they are, and they can be. They can have no genetic abnormalities whatsoever, and it's just whatever for whatever reason, that's the way that they turned out, where that's a woman but definitely sounds like a man, right? And sometimes there are trans people, it's like, hey, you pass really well, and some trans people who are sort of more on the sort of hedonistic ideology side of it will say, I don't want to be told that I pass well or that I don't pass well, I just want to be validated, which is like, okay, but you can't expect that. If you actually expect that from the world, you're going to be miserable. Like, if you can't go through your entire day without sort of having that synced up. Oh cripes, I just realized I don't have my I don't have one of my secondary mic plugged in. I'm gonna go plug that in. Zoinkers in this thing. How is it not even over here? Where is my SM? Yes, please. Yes, now we are actually recording a sound in this thing. So that's good. That's a thing. Glad that's going on. Yeah, I totally forgot that that my brother was that I lent out my my SM58, and so didn't even realize, I gotta whip out the SM57 so I can have my backup mic doing its thing over there. Can it even hear me? Maybe I do have to turn it up. I'm gonna turn you up. There we are. It's always just best to have a little bit of a flashing light over there indicating that it can actually hear me. Anyhow, it's like, I don't believe that behavior is defined by biology. I believe that behavior is defined by the person who's decided to behave in the way that they behave. And some of that is like, well, that's just what I've been taught. And some of that is, well, actually, I've thought about what I've been taught, and I've decided to reject some of that, and I've decided that some of that is true. And so therefore, I decide to behave in this way. Obviously, one of those is objectively better. I'm not going to pretend that somebody who is just I am what the world made me. It's just like, no, you are less of a realized and joyful person, and you will be less of a successful person the longer that you sit around and just, woe is me, everything is never my fault, it's always somebody else's. Either way, every single time. See, I try to be quick with it, but I am I am liable to fail when it comes to staying on task, when it comes to speaking on stuff. Always gonna kind of slip outside of the ideas that I want to actually give. But yeah, the assumption that, because it's just like, if you replace this with sex, people assume bones can tell you sex. Yes, they can tell you sex. You can tell, someone who's experienced enough can tell just by looking at a skeleton that this is a female child. This is a male child. This is the skeleton of a adult male and an adult female. They must have weighed about this much, and they clearly are about this tall. You can tell with tremendous accuracy just from the bones what is going on. And the more you look into the bones, the more, I mean, that's why I say, there was an episode an episode about this on the show Bones, where there was a transgender individual that was a XY. He was a male, and then he wanted to present as a female, and decided to transition, and got breast implants and the whole 9 yards, and was a kind of a sort of a religious leader in this local area and whatnot. And it's like, well, eventually Bones had figured it out, where it's just like, oh yeah, this is somebody who clearly is, we've got an ID on this individual, and this person is this way. Like, whether or not that is the healthiest way for somebody to live is obviously up to debate. But the fact that people live that way is not, is not going to be changed by the fact that some people don't like it. And that goes for either way. Like, some people don't like that Christians believe Christian beliefs, but that doesn't change the fact that Christians exist. Same thing. Same thing as Jews. Same thing as literally any group, is that people live in this way. People exist in this realm, and no amount of you disliking those people is going to cease their existence, unless you decide to send them to the gulag and the grinder and whatnot. Then those people are not going to cease existing. Should those people cease existing? Well, if they're living and they are making decisions that are not affecting anybody but themselves, I think it's a good idea to say, well, you are still alive right now, and so we should actually help you make better decisions so that you can be happier, because there is a direct correlation between making good decisions and being happier. And we should at least have the discussion about being critical about your decisions, and what about your decisions is motivating your unhappiness, so that you can correct those. I've gotten off into the weeds again. You can tell biological sex from bones, but people who say, well, your gender is the way that you express yourself. And it's just like, well, if you dig in far enough with bones, you can actually tell a significant amount. And this is the thing. It's just like people assume bones can tell your personal. It's just like, well, I don't know, The Incredibles. You can tell a lot about a lady by the contents of a purse. But I don't think that's what you had in mind. But this is the thing is that actually if you dig in far enough, you can actually tell a significant amount of at least what that person experienced that affected the musculoskeletal. I mean, you're not going to know about the musculo, but you're going to know about the skelecature, and you can actually tell. It's like, okay, so this person likely died by being bludgeoned on the head. This person clearly has an arrow wound, or a wound of this shape, and this, if we try to date them back to around this time, clearly this person was in this time shot in the head with an arrow, and he actually had other fractures in the skull that clearly were there over a very long period of time. This person was likely a warrior that died in war. And if you look back to the cultural scenario of warriors that died in war, if you look into this particular moment where they were effectively, it was effectively a job where it was like, okay, so you pay me as your government entity, you pay me based off the taxes that you excise from your people, and it doesn't matter that I'm from Florence. I am going to join the rest of my Florentine peers, and I'm going to fight in an army because I am a warrior for hire. If you look into certain, I believe that is you're looking at 12th century. 13th maybe. I'm not an expert in that. I've just kind of like bouncing around in my brain. You can tell a significant amount of, okay, how was somebody from this time, archaeologists, because you can just be a bone. You could just be looking at the bones, but archaeologists look at far more than bones. They look at everything that is in front of them, and the site that it's at is relevant. The date that, as far as they can accurately tell with the radiometrics and the carbon dating and whatnot, which I don't think is entirely an accurate way to tell age. I think there's a lot of overstatement of that, where it's like, well, we know exactly where things came from. It's like, I don't think you can have 100% certainty with that, given the entire sort of mental experiment, the challenge of the candle. Can you tell how long the candle has been burning or when it was lit, or can you just tell how much of the candle has been burned? If you assume it started here and it. Well, no, you have to assume where it started. You can't tell where it started and how much it's burned. The only thing you could say is this is how much is in it. So it's rough to be able to jump the conclusions in that sense. But regardless, goodness sake, I literally just cannot stay on task for the life of me. All of this is very interesting, but your personality is not defined by your genetics, but there's still a certain amount of you that's defined by genetics, and you have to actually have a healthy relationship with the reality of that. But funnily enough, I'm like, okay, well, I'm bisexual and I enjoy a certain amount of things that are quote unquote feminine, but does that mean that I'm any less of a man? Well, biologically, no matter how much activities that I do, I'm not going to suddenly one day wake up out of bed and become and have, I'm not going to just be a woman randomly. Like, that's not going to happen. It's impossible for that to happen. But I don't think that if I see a man in a skirt that he is less of a man for doing that. At least in an objective sense. A lot of the time people believe in a moral sense, which is like, well, a man doesn't behave in this way because my definition of a man is not having a Y chromosome. My definition of a man is behaving in this type of a way. That is more of a moral side to it, but I'm speaking more of an objective point of view. Your behavior does not define what you are. Your behavior defines who you are. And so if you're worried about who you are, which if you're using this term and if you define it in the way that these people tend to define it, then you're worried about who you are, and that's good. But you have to actually be realistic about what you are and what bearing what you are has on who you are. And what they want to do is they'll say, okay, no, we're going to separate sex and gender, where sex is what you are and gender is who you are. And then they're going to say, because who I am doesn't like what I am going to actually remerge those and say who I am is more important than what I am, which is like, yeah, okay, I agree with you so far. But then they say, therefore, who I am is what I am. And it's like, well, no, not exactly. Because what you are is what I am, for example, is a male. Who I am is a male that does this and behaves in this way, and you know, very multifaceted, nuanced, complicated creature. You know, not to toot my own horn, everybody's a pretty complicated creature, but you know, it's inherently fallacious to say, well, your behavior, and this is kind of the issue, is that they're actually creating the problem they wish to solve, because they're like, you can be whoever you want to be, you can be who you are and not be ashamed of who you are. It's like, well, okay, maybe you should feel shame for who you are, just in a general sense, because there's some things that actually you should be ashamed of, some behaviors you should be ashamed of. If you have dignity, actually shame is something that serves to protect dignity, so long as it isn't I suppose guilt rather than shame. Guilt is self-imposed, and shame, depending on your definition, shame can be imposed by others or by the society. But I don't actually think that wearing makeup makes you less of a man, or that wearing makeup is what makes you a female. But they seem to think that is the case. And it's like, right then. Because it's like, you think if you take a male bone and you put a bow on it, sort of with this simplistic idea that it's like, that it actually changes the fact that that bone came from a male. Like, no, that's just not reality. Anyway, just finally moved on about this. Archaeologists need to take into consideration multiple factors such as the cultural circumstances, the type of burial, or even accessories. And yes, this is something that archaeologists do. You know, but they don't also just throw out biology, like so many people from this side of the aisle would love to do. This side of this debate would love to do. Is it's just like, oh no, biology doesn't matter. You are whatever you wish you were. It's like, well, you are what you choose to be, and clearly you have chosen to be somebody who has an unhealthy relationship with reality. Like, who you choose to be is going to be evident on the accessories and etc., etc. So clearly, yes, as I've already stated before on this topic, that archaeologists are going to take into account all of these things, but they're also not going to ignore things that are there just to suit your agenda, being the person who is dead. The person who is dead probably is going to object to the fact that there are scientists examining their bodies. They're not going to do that. They're not going to stop doing their job just to suit the agenda of the person who thinks what they think about who they are. And you know, it's all for the pursuit of higher truth. That's what science is. Science, I think a big mistake that has happened within science is that we've actually been saying, well, we're pursuing higher truth, except for the truth that actually is challenging to me, because challenging equals hard, and I don't actually want to deal with hard things. I don't want to do hard things. I don't want to be challenged. I don't want to actually learn more. I just want to be able to simplify the world into the box that I've painted it into, rather than finding more nuance for it. And there's a big mistake of science, is it's not science anymore once you do that. Actually, it's fruit of the poison tree at that point, where it's just like, well, I had an idea, I had a hypothesis, and I was determined to prove it. And it's just like, okay, you can be as determined to prove it as you like, but you can't throw out evidence that doesn't support your narrative. And so in that sense, attempting to be objective is attempting to be scientific. And if you are attempting to be objective and scientific as an archaeologist, of course you're not going to ignore cultural circumstances, types of burials, and accessories. Of course you're not going to throw any of that out. Bones didn't. When Bones saw the breast implants, obviously they were like, okay, so this is probably a woman on first glance. And then she looks at the rest of the bones, and then she's like, oh, this is a male skeleton, but there are breast implants. This probably is indicative of the fact that this was a male who wanted to get breast implants for whatever reason that may be. Most likely this person is trans. That is a scientific look at what that is. And it's funny where it's like, obviously they're going to know you're trans because they're going to say, well, this person wanted breasts but didn't have them and was also male, and the reason they didn't have them is because they were male. So they clearly were doing things in order to try and get what they wanted out of that situation, right? I don't understand why this means that it necessitates that they agree with the fact that you were literally the opposite of what you literally are. That is a bizarre claim, and I don't understand why we can't just stick with that. It's very intellectually dishonest. It's like, okay, I am me. That this is my identity. It's like, okay, or at least this is who I am. And I'm like, oh, all right. But the continuing of that is, you actually have to respect my identity. It's just like, okay, you just mandated respect, something that is earned. Do you think that's going to ever work? Has this ever worked in economics? Has this ever worked in literally any facet of reality? No. It's the Cobra effect. The more and more you try to enforce what you want, the less and less. The more that that sand is going to slip through your fingers. And if you tell people, I just want to be left alone, people are going to be supportive of that. People are going to be like, hey, I agree with that. If you say you actually have to agree with me, and if you do not agree with me, then you are a bigoted, evil, a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, whatever the other one is. It's like, you have now actually made it far, far less likely that anybody is actually going to agree with you, that anybody is going to support you, and you are going to kill any amount of sympathy that anybody had. What you should be doing is, rather than taking people who sympathize with you or empathize with you and blasting them for thinking differently, even though they do feel bad, you could say, I'm glad you understand my plight, and we can disagree about this in a liberal society, in a civilized liberal society that believes in liberties, that we can disagree about this and go about our days without actually, impeding on other people's rights, liberties. But that's not exactly what we're talking about. DNA testing can only tell your chromosomes sometimes. And that's not a good indicator of gender either. This is where we get into some falsehoods here. DNA testing can only tell your chromosomes, which is biological sex. And sometimes it's like, well, yes, there's a margin of error. The technology isn't perfect. You can't always know exactly how things are happening. And so obviously you're going to take enough samples from the individual as you can get so that you can actually get so many of a samples that your margin of error is good. Whereas if you take one sample, it's entirely possible that sample will give you a bad result. But you can absolutely tell your biological sex. And to say chromosomes, also learn to spell. This is kind of a, it's a nitpick, but I'm not going to, it decreases your intellectual credibility in my eyes a little bit if you don't actually know how to spell the words that you are using, especially in the age where we've got spell check literally at the tips of our fingers. literally at the tips of our fingers. It's incredible. You don't even have to use your fingers. You can literally just say out loud and ask a assistant that is spying on you constantly. But that's neither here nor there. But it's like, that's not a good indicator of gender either. Okay, can we at least have defined our terms with this? This is so stupid and ridiculous. It's not a good indicator of gender. Yeah. So thing about that is, buddy, that we're not agreeing on our terms here, because you seem to have gender as this stupid like postmodernistic idea of like, oh, it's just an aesthetic, it's just a thing. It's like, no, like if what you're talking about personality, if that's what you're talking about is personality, then yeah, you can't tell someone's personality based on their bones. You can infer many things about their personality based on their bones and the effects that their skeleture has. You can tell due to the consequences what the causes were, due to the effects what the causes were. But it's like, why they stopped DNA testing in the Olympics? I could Google that, but inherently this is a flawed thing, because we're using terms that I don't even think they could define. It's like, okay, so what is gender? What does that mean? It's just like, it's just who you are. It's just like, okay, so you're talking about identity. So doesn't that mean gender identity is a redundant phrase? Maybe we should phase that one out. Like, why don't you just say what you damn mean? And this is my greatest contention with the left in general, is that they can never say what they mean. They will say something incredibly vague and then get mad at you when you say, well, okay, but that doesn't make any sense though. Well, oh, I can't believe that you're saying that I don't make sense. It's like, okay, you haven't made any sense here. Help me along a little bit. Throw me a bone, pun intended. The archaeologist 200 years into the future will know your name. Potentially, it's also entirely possible. I mean, we have Jane Doe's, John and Jane Doe's all over the country. You know, unsolved murders, corpses. There's things. There's things that we're not exactly gonna understand here. So. You don't always have a name, and sometimes you can get eventually enough of like, oh, okay, so this is actually a positive ID on this person, or we can infer it's most likely that this was this person, whatever it is, but they're not necessarily going to know your name, because you don't actually know how you are going to die. Unless you are Joe Hawley, you don't know how you're going to die. You don't know if you are going to actually have a grave, because you don't know if there's going to be a nuclear holocaust tomorrow. You may not have a reasonable belief that will happen tomorrow, but, it's still a possibility, which, of course, is concerning. But this is the importance here. It's like, they're not necessarily going to know your name, because you can't tell the future. The only way you can know that the archaeologist, you can't even know, because even if you go and get buried under a gravestone that has your name on it, does not mean that gravestone is going to be intact and legible. Even if you have records of where your burial site is and all of that, doesn't mean that those records will be preserved. There's no guarantee of any of this. So this is just like incredibly presumptive things to say that objectively the archaeologist is going to, in 200 years, know exactly what they're doing. And I mean, frankly, there's not actually a lot of archaeological things 200 years into the future that people are necessarily going to be doing. And I say necessarily. I don't think it's highly likely that people are going to be looking around and being like, okay, so let's find this. Let's have a dig site in a burial ground that was like 200 years ago. Like I don't know. I feel like those are going to be relatively well preserved. Because I mean, you can go into a lot of what you do, because there's not necessarily archaeologists, because there's still like a certain amount of legality when it comes to actually exhuming bodies. And it's like 200 years into the future. Okay, try like 20,000, 2,000 in the very least. Like 200 is not enough for archaeologists to be actually trying to dig you up. Because like, unless there is something like a Holocaust of some kind where it's just like, okay, now we don't know anything about anything because we're like several generations removed from being cut off from all of this human knowledge that was here. Like, this is just highly, highly implausible that this is going to happen in 200 years, let alone really at all. That most people, if they're trying to research a particular individual, are doing so for historical purposes or for family history purposes or for like whatever it may be. Scheisse. So it's just highly unlikely. They might notice if you had breast implants, as I've said in the bones episode, this was the case, or any surgery in your jaw. What about the jaw is corrected in transitional surgeries? I've actually never heard of that one, other than perhaps I don't know. I've heard about the Adam's apple getting shaved down. I could see it though, because, you know, that's one of the things that people look at with the physiognomy of like male or female and whatnot. They might know if you were trans, or they might never know your gender at all. And again, we're using this term that nobody knows the definition of, and nobody actually wants to give a definition, because the moment that you actually give definitions, the moment that you acknowledge that there is an objective reality here, that you actually have to communicate things that make damn sense, and they don't want to do that. I genuinely think there is a purpose behind people intentionally using vague terms, or intentionally choosing difficult, nuanced situations and dumbing them down to such a degree, because then if anybody says, hey, you're kind of dumbing this situation down, then they can say you're just a bigot. And it's intellectually dishonest, and people should honestly just respond with, okay, you're being an arsehole. Like, you are actually ascribing a motivation to me here that is more indicative of you than it is of me. But regardless, yeah, it's entirely possible that they will never know your identity, your personal. They're not going to know your personality to an insane degree. It's like, okay, but there is going to be a digital footprint, of course. And this is one of the things I was wanting to mention earlier, is that it is an insane amount of stuff that we are recording every single day. This is going to be an aspect of recorded history right here. This podcast that I'm recording, it, you know, once it goes up on the internet, you know, it never truly comes down necessarily. It depends entirely. But there's always, if that data is picked up somewhere else, it's recorded somewhere else, and it's going to be there, and there's going to be digital forensics that is going to go back and be reincorporated into this historical sort of view of all of this stuff. So, you know, it's like, they might never know who you were, but if they can actually identify you with a digital footprint, they're going to know a significant amount about who you were, because they're going to have videos of you. They're going to have recorded conversations of you that you saved on your hard drive, or that you had on your phone, or that you uploaded to the cloud and never took down, that they ended up pillaging that. In an archaeological sense, they went and they dug up a data center that was abandoned for whatever reason, and that had that data in it, and they could connect that positively to you. But they will know your biological sex. Far more likely that they will know your biological sex. You can identify biological sex from a skeleton, like probably 99 to 1. If you have a complete skeleton, like, yeah, this is a Homo sapiens, and this is the biological sex of this la creatura. Like, I don't understand. It's like, they might never know at all. We got a full skeleton here, but I'm just stumped. There's just no clues. It's like, okay, be for real, okay? They're gonna know. But when you're talking about personality, if that's what you mean by that, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe they won't. In 200 years, it's far less likely that they would that all of that info would have degraded. But it's just bizarre. Oh, I didn't see. I misspelled so many things, even they were double checked. Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect. Not about to hang you on that. I will criticize, though. not gonna like actually send you to the gallows, though. You can keep your head, but you know, they will for sure know you were loved, or they will know that you rejected your entire family because they couldn't go along with what you were doing to yourself. That's entirely a possibility as well, and that goes for people whether or not they are trans. It's entirely possible that people are going to be able to look into that situation, and if the entire purpose is, I want to find as much as I can possibly find to figure out about this person, then they'll be able to do a significant amount and be able to pinpoint a significant portion of things, especially if you have a digital footprint. Historians are going to be able to look back into that and be like, okay, so this person, this is the way that they felt, this is their perspective. How about the rest of their family? How did they feel about this? What was the situation here? And just because one person says things to be a certain way doesn't mean that another person is going to and I mean, this entire debate is evidentiary of that, is that, you know, people are going to say, okay, so I understand that you feel put upon for your behavior and who you choose to be, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to agree that you actually are put upon. Maybe I'm going to say that you probably need to stop trying to force other people to like you, because it's never going to work. The moment that you come in saying you need to like me is the moment that everybody's going to say, piss off, I don't like you because you just told me what to do in a forceful way. Maybe you should actually present yourself in a way that's convincing of me to like you. Maybe if you want me to respect you, you should do things that actually are deserving of respect. And there is nothing that is more contemptible, more undeserving of respect, or at least demonstrative that you do not deserve respect, than going in and behaving like a fascist in this way, where it's like, you have to validate me and my personal feelings because my feelings matter more than anybody else's personal feelings, and not just their personal feelings, their liberty. Their rights do not matter, but my feelings do. That is you are destined to be a miserable person with no friends, if you behave that way. And even other people who behave that way, because they are behaving in that way where nobody else matters except for me, they're going to start using you too. And so then you're going to be, if you actually care about yourself, supposedly you care about yourself kind of to a fault here, you're going to cut off people. And that is not going to just never show up in a historical record of who you were as a person. And if your ancestors, assuming that you're having ancestors and you haven't actually made yourself infertile by your personal choices and behavior, then they're going to be looking back and saying, this is someone who was in my family, who kind of behaved in the way that they behaved. And you know, just because they can't necessarily see that you were loved, like that's not, you know, they will know you were loved. I mean, if you were loved, in whatever definition you want to put to that, where, you know, clearly somebody who cares for their children. I mean, everybody, I think, is loved eventually, but you know, I don't think love is necessarily a guarantee. And they're not necessarily going to be able to look back and see, well, this person was clearly loved. They might actually see, well, this person clearly did not actually like other people who challenged them. This person clearly rejected any amount of help that wasn't inherently just saying you should just be hedonistic and follow your, you know, tendencies, follow your whatever you call them, inhibitions, aspirations, whatever. Somebody who didn't just say, "Oh, you're so right, you're so right." Those are fake people. Those people are not actually don't actually care about you. Sometimes the people you love will say, "No, you are wrong about this." And the reason I'm saying you're wrong about this is because I do love you and I want you to have a healthy relationship with reality. You know, the people who just like, oh, you were so, it's like that. That's kind of parasitical in a way. It's not actually being helpful to you. It's hampering you. It's making it so that you are going to stick in the way that you are forever. I mean, people who literally tell you that you're perfect the way that you are dooming you to a life of stagnancy, of you will never improve because, I mean, you're perfect the way that you are. And it's like, okay, just because life is hard and just because you doubt yourself sometimes does not mean you're perfect the way that you are. And that's the blue pill, all right? Like, you have to look at that as a harmful thing. Because if you think that you're perfect the way that you are, then why do you do anything that you do? Why do you want more, right? Like, why does anybody try to go about life in that way? Why do you want to get a better job to earn more money? Why do you want to have a relationship? Why do you want to do any of these things? It's because you think that you're going to have improvement by doing that. You're not perfect the way that you are. Why do you say, oh, I hate the way that I behave in this sense? It's because you're not perfect. And you can understand, because you live in objective reality, that there is not perfection in you. That there is imperfection in you. It's like you have to actually, that is not, love, is telling somebody that they are perfect just the way that they are, because they're not. Nobody is. And nobody ever will be. I truly don't think. I think you can become pretty dang good, but you actually have to aspire to become pretty dang good. You can't just, I'm going to tell myself it is, and therefore it will be so. Those who lived to hate others will rot in their forgotten tombs, nameless for eternity. I think this is remarkably, it's assumption. It has assumptions on multiple levels, multiple assumptions that I think are very unfair in this statement, where it's like, oh, they're going to rot in their forgotten tombs, nameless for eternity. Like, again, spelling issues aside, no. Absolutely not. There were people who, I don't know, if you simplify people who lived to hate others, I generally don't think that only people who are like Dark Triad do that, and the people who are Dark Triad tend to make a pretty good name for themselves. So, if you go back and say, I don't know, Robert E. Lee, or the example that everybody, because every single discussion eventually comes back to Hitler. It's like, Hitler, has he rotted in his forgotten tomb and nameless for eternity? No. He's actually been one of the most cited people in history, for good or for bad. Mostly for bad, because let's be honest, objectively, mostly bad. like 99.9% of the things that we know about Hitler's life kind of served to be bad. Except, I suppose, the example. But I don't think we want to learn from examples of that caliber, obviously. But it's like, no. People who, even if someone is very miserable and hateful, they're going to be remembered, because they're going to be people. Everybody has an effect on this life. The only way that you are going to not be remembered if that is if that effect is, infinitesimal. If you have a really small effect, or small enough, if it's small enough that people actually didn't write about that, or people didn't talk about that, or people didn't change their behavior due to that, or it didn't actually affect people in that great of a way, that's the only way that you were going to be forgotten. Whereas if you actually do something great, or I suppose do something that is of large consequence, you're going to be remembered, whether that consequence is horrible or that consequence is great. It's like you're not going to be forgotten, and this is just this vindictive sense of like, those people who don't like me, those people who won't validate my particular lifestyle choices. It's just like those people are going to rot for eternity. It's just like, who's living to hate others here? Because I'm perfectly willing to say that you want what's best for everybody. You want everybody to be happier, and you want everybody to be able to coexist with each other. I would be willing to grant you that. I'd be willing to grant you that, but this behavior is not indicative of that. This behavior is indicative of a vindictive mentality when it comes to people who disagree. And people can disagree with you without being hateful towards you, and people can be hateful towards you without disagreeing with you. Like you can just be hateful. Like, I don't know. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre thing that people say because they're trying to validate their own perspective, and there's currency in this. There's loads of bloody currency in validating people's perspectives, because they run from the cognitive dissonance towards the confirmation bias, and that is what this type of this is a religious statement, an extremely religious statement. Both of these are extremely religious statements. This is a religious statement. This is a religion that may not necessarily have a name in and of itself at this point, but it's a belief system, and it is a belief system that is frankly wrong. It is inherently wrong that these people who disagree with me are going to rot forever in forgotten tombs. It's like, no, they're not. No, they're not. And that's neither a good nor a bad thing. It just is. And beyond that, you should not be assuming that people hate you. Let me never fall into the vulgar mistake of thinking that I am being persecuted when I am contradicted. Whoever had said that, it's like you are not being persecuted because you're being contradicted. You're being contradicted, not persecuted. Different things. Sometimes people do both. Sometimes people are just doing one or the other. But it's just ridiculous that this is the sort of the way that people look at this stuff. It's like, love and be loved and you might never be forgotten. It's like, yeah, so what you are saying is that people who think that being transgender is not good for you, in a sense, in a healthy sense, in a mentally healthy sense, in a lifestyle sense, people who think that way cannot love anybody. It's like, I don't think you know what love is then. Love, and clearly because of the ideology here, where it's like, oh, you're just perfect the way that you are. Like, that's not love. That's actually incredibly destructive. Someone who loves somebody is not going to say something so incredibly destructive to them. If you actually love somebody, you're going to say you are not perfect the way that you are, and you need to improve. And the way that you improve is by realizing your imperfections and seeking to mitigate them through action and behavior. That inherently is far more of a loving statement than just like, oh, I'm just going to be supportive of whatever you do. There is objective reality, and your actions have consequences, and there are negative, objectively consequences that you don't want to have. And so if you tell people that those consequences just don't exist, that's kind of not very, very loving of them. Because you're lying to them. Every single time you do that to somebody, you are lying to them in a way that directly encourages them to continue to behave in a way that makes them miserable. And that is not love and never will be love. And, it's this assumption that people who actually can believe, as I believe, that is not a healthy, loving thing to do to somebody, can't love anybody else, and that is actually just inherently hateful. It's not. I'm never going to accept that is the case, as so many of these people purport it to be. So it's just interesting, because it's like, I get what you're going for here, man. Like, I like the idea of love and be loved, but people who didn't love I think everybody, unless they're like Dark Triad, I don't know. It's an abstract thing. Some people loved and were forgotten. Some people didn't love, and some people hated, and they were never forgotten either. So this is not based on reality, and it's only based on some kind of insane thing. Send this to a transphobe that uses that remark as an own. Yeah, and so you're going to assume that somebody says like, hey, Bones can tell this thing. You're going to assume that somebody responds to that in a way that is just like, oh wow, I totally didn't realize, now that you've shown me a list of your religious texts, that now I totally understand. It's just like, I can understand. It's insulting to the intelligence. I can understand why you have a rationale for what you believe, and that you came to that rationale based off of your own risk assessment. But I'm not going to just up and change my beliefs because I observe that you believe yours, that you hold your beliefs to be true. It's just like, hey, but I believe that this is the case, so you are wrong about this. It's just like, okay, I understand why you think that I am wrong, but you're not going to that's not convincing me just by you saying that this is what I believe, because this is the thing, this is not a convincing case. Never really will be. That this is the conclusion of this, is that it's just like, if you think that being trans has consequences that are undesirable, whatever the case may be, then that means you're a homophobe, and that means you're hateful, and if you are hateful, you are going to die, which is just a stupid argument. It's just out of almost every single step in that line of reasoning is flawed. Every premise is flawed in this situation. That's not going to convince anybody. You need to make a far more convincing case, because all this is just feelings, man. You just gotta go along with the feelings. My density. It's just like, come off it. You're not convincing anybody. And it's not hateful to say so, because I've given a lot of I really do think some intellectual, but also empathetic arguments here, and admitted a lot of things that I understand about this. This is a nuanced topic, and you are not going to convince anybody who is actually looking for more higher truth by jumping down people's throats about it in this way. It's never going to be an effective way to convince people, and people ought to ditch this. People ought to actually try to pursue more truth, even if they have their conclusions that they've already came to going into the debate. This is not something that people are willing to do because this just proves that you do not know why you believe what you believe, because when you try to explain why you believe what you believe, it falls flat on its face. And when you actually enter into any sort of a debate with anybody and you start saying these types of things, well, no, they don't debate people because they're wrong. Like, nobody is actually okay with having this conversation with people because it demonstrates that they are not confident in their beliefs because they don't know why they believe what they believe, and all of the reasons, all of the grasping at straws that they have when it comes to this only further proves as evidence to suggest that is the case. So I have got to go because I overstayed my stupid bloody my alarm here. So this is it, and I think I still kind of fit it in to the proper degree here. So yeah, hopefully I can get it even more succinct next time, because I clearly wasn't completely succinct here, but I was talking a bit fast and covered a lot of ground here. There's always more to be spoken on in the debate, but I just need to cut myself off eventually because the time blindness is going to kill me if I continue this way. So adieu, parting is such sweet cock. I can't end it like that. Oh, piss off. Goodbye.